What I'm going to talk about today is what neural networks taught me about therapy. And as basically, therapy techniques today feel very woo-woo, and our culture labels, these different techniques as being very odd. Take internal family systems, for example. You talk to voices inside your head that have their own entire personalities and represent younger versions of yourself or members of your family. This feels totally crazy. Or in EDMR, which is like a rapid eye movement therapy, you flick your eyes back and forth, and this allows you to somehow access and talk about and overcome traumatic experiences. Cognitive behavioral therapy is probably the most known or the most rational, but it's still remarkable. You identify beliefs about the world, and then you change them, and then the rest of your behavior just magically changes. And so what I want to talk about is kind of a conjecture on what might be going on here, using what I've learned about how neural networks learn. So as a caveat, these are total conjectures with no evidence or experiments. I call it a conjecture. If you have any ideas on how to actually test these, I'd love to hear them. So I'm really only going to have time to cover one idea, which is this idea of trauma as overfitting. I'm going to go into what that means exactly. So what is trauma? Something I've realized is trauma is if you're being chased by a tiger and you are chased by tigers regularly in life, then you don't consider learning to run away from tigers trauma. This is because that belief generalizes to the rest of your life. It's not maladaptive. I think trauma is when you learn beliefs that don't generalize. For example, when I was young, I learned that my mom wouldn't love me if I do badly in school, because one day she came home stressed out and she yelled at me, and I was like, oh no, my mom won't love me. But this belief is not true. It's not adaptive, because she does love me. And so what is overfitting if trauma is overfitting? Well, in machine learning, when you have a small training data set, it's really easy to overfit. And what happens is that your overfit model doesn't generalize to new data that the model gets. By definition, children actually have a small data set. They haven't seen much data in their life. They learn very quickly from a few samples. But this might actually be why it's so easy to become quote-unquote traumatized in childhood. And also, learnings might get frozen. In our neural network training, it's very easy to, it's much easier to retrain part of a network than the entire network, or components, keep different components frozen. And I'm going to make the claim that these things that you learn in childhood get frozen because it's less computationally expensive, it's more stable than always retraining them. For example, I don't want to recompute whether I should run away from a tiger every time I see a tiger. That's quite dangerous and expensive. So I'm going to also make the claim that therapy is kind of equivalent to retraining a frozen neural network with more data, with more training data. And in particular, what I observe is that most modes of therapy, or many modes of therapy, have two steps. First, the step of accessing a belief or a negative feeling or part that's not serving you. And I call this accessing the network. And second, getting new training data, new data about your life in order to update the belief. So I'm going to walk through a few examples of therapy techniques in which this happens. So in internal family systems, the process is first you find a part. It's kind of like a part of you that's talking. So that's accessing the network. And you learn more about this part. You ask it what its job is, so its optimization function. You ask it what its strategy is for accomplishing that job, what we call a policy. You ask it how old it thinks you are. And then the second step is that you show it a mental video of your current life and how it's wrong about your life, and so therefore its goal or its policy is not adaptive. And magically, in internal family systems, when you show this part your current life, it actually will change itself. It updates its own beliefs about what its goals should be and what its strategy should be. And this feels a lot like that network just got retrained. In CBT, again, it's the same process that happens again, which first you identify non-adaptive beliefs. Often we call these cognitive distortions. So that's accessing the network. Each belief, kind of is a network. You observe situations in which these beliefs are not adaptive. So you're kind of basically collecting training data about how this belief is old and doesn't work. And then finally, you develop new habits to reshape these beliefs. So you retrain. And then in EDMR, again, very similar process. I'm going to zoom through this because it's, again, accessing, collecting training data, retraining. And so the implications of this model of therapy, neural network-based model of therapy, is kind of interesting. If you think about therapy as retraining a frozen overfit neural network, and as this two-step process of accessing the network and giving the network new data to update it, that means you can actually debug in any given situation for a person or the trauma they're experiencing, which step is failing. Is it accessing the belief, the network? Is it acquiring new training data? Like, is this person in a really unsafe environment, and that's why actually they don't have good training data to update? Or is it the actual process of retraining? There's something that's preventing them from being able to retrain. And you can create new therapy techniques that address whichever step is failing.